It's really a pleasure to be back with all of you again after our day together yesterday. And it's truly my honor and privilege to introduce to you Bob Heinzen. Bob Heinzen comes to us as the past director of the NIMH Division of Services and Intervention Research. And I think, thankfully for all of us, continues on as a senior advisor within the learning healthcare research at NIMH when it's open and operating. And we're especially fortunate to have Bob because he's part of our roots. He is a graduate of Catholic University of America, and he completed his internship at McLean Hospital, right here with us. And fortunate for us, travels back often for visits. He completed his residency at Chestnut Lodge Hospital. He is a board-certified clinical psychologist, a fellow of the American Academy of Clinical Psychology, and a veteran of the U.S. Army Medical Services Corps. Bob is recognized internationally as a leader in science to practice initiatives, particularly for people with severe mental illness. And I have to say that he has spoken so eloquently. I had the privilege of hearing about sort of his work with the U.S. Army Medical Services Corps and how that really inspired his focus on research rapidly informing practice and practice informing research, that we don't have time to wait. And so Bob has been a leader in many areas, but particularly in early psychosis on translating research into practice. And is really, I think, one of the primary people responsible for EpiNet, the nation's first learning healthcare system for people with serious mental illness, and really was the inspiration for much of the work that we do here in Massachusetts and part of MapNet. And so I just want to welcome you, Bob. We're so grateful to have you here with us today.
Thank you, Margaret. I appreciate being invited. I think of the 6 MapNet meetings, I've participated in at least 3 of them. So it's been exciting to see the progress in Massachusetts over these last several years. And today, what an incredible treat to start today off with Eric Chen and Moretta Nordentoft, bring in an international perspective on what's newsworthy in the early intervention space. I've always acknowledged that in the United States, we have benefited from the excellent work that's happening in Denmark, in the UK, in Canada, in Hong Kong, Australia. So really wonderful to have that energy brought into this meeting in Massachusetts. And Moretta, I just want to say it always lifts my spirits to see you and your smile. So I have benefited already from that. So I'm going to share my screen now. And then I am going to move you guys over to here. Okay. Okay, so Moretta and Eric brought an international perspective to today's conversation. I have to say that I'm going to be focusing primarily on progress and opportunities in the United States, and then relating that to what I see as some of the exciting things that are happening in Massachusetts. Before I start, I have some disclosures. I have no personal financial relationships with commercial interests relevant to this presentation. Margaret, I do have to clarify one thing you said. I retired from NIMH in December of 2024. But before that, I worked for 25 years on translational, comparative effectiveness, and implementation research in early psychosis. I was working at NIMH earlier this year as a senior advisor, but in the Doge experience, I was well, I am no longer associated with NIMH in any way at this point. So I am speaking to you as a private citizen. I also wanted you to know something that many of you, I don't have much reason to talk about this much, but for a decade before I joined NIMH, I directed a countywide treatment system in Maryland for 800 adults with serious mental illness. And that treatment system included 4 levels of care, a multidisciplinary workforce, and a diverse payer mix. So in that decade before joining NIMH, I really had the experience of a clinical administrator who was responsible for delivering high quality services to this population, but also doing it in a way that I could live within budgets, that I could maximize the payer mix, and that I could make sure that the people who work for me were going to get paid every other week. And that gave me a particular perspective on the work that I did at NIMH, that, leaning towards practicality and real world implementation. And some of that prior experience is going to come into my talk today. When I talk about future directions, I'm going to focus mainly on things that I think will increase our capacity to deliver services in the United States in real world communities with a high degree of quality and faithfulness to the research that spurred them, but also in a way that that they would be sustainable, meaning that they can be paid for and have an enduring lifetime. So those are some of the disclosures that I have. I'm going to take an unusual step and give my at least one set of acknowledgments at the beginning of the talk. The first half of this talk is a science to practice success story. And like good stories, it includes strong characters from academia, from federal and state governments, community organizations, and young people and family members with lived experience. I know from my past visits to these conferences, all of those groups are represented in the audience that is participating in this meeting today, and it's a wonderful thing. The talk is going to celebrate the courage, the perseverance, and the partnership among all of these stakeholders who have come together over a period of time to advance mental health for all in the United States. Then the second half of this talk is going to acknowledge that today all of us are meeting to continue this work. And by meeting, by sharing our experiences, by getting our stories out there, we'll be crafting a compelling sequel that'll inspire those who follow us. So the outline for today, I'm going to be speaking briefly about early intervention services in the United States over the last decade, from 2014 to 2024. I'm going to talk about how research was translated into action over that period and gives us a set of tools that we can use in our day-to-day clinical practice. Then as I shift to talking about the future for the US early psychosis ecosystem, I'm going to talk about the rationale for integrating clinical high risk and first episode service models for something for you to consider as Massachusetts continues to evolve its treatment system. And then finally, I'll talk about future directions for service delivery and research that might help inform that service delivery. So first part of the talk, early intervention services in the United States, 2014 to 2024. So many of you are aware of this, that Congress established the mental health block grant set aside for first episode psychosis in 2014. They did that because they were aware of research that was coming out of the RAISE and the STEP clinical trials that gave us good reason to believe that early intervention services for psychosis could be implemented in real world settings in the United States, and that the short-term outcomes of those efforts benefited the people who received those services. Since the establishment of the block grant set aside, the total number of research-based programs, coordinated specialty care programs, has increased sixfold over the decade. And that was accomplished by a partnership between the National Institute of Mental Health, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administrations, and state mental health authorities who work together to implement evidence-based treatment programs, to expand them within the states, and that progress has continued to date. And now, well, the last data that we have, or that I have available to me, is from 2022, where over 20,000 young people with first episode psychosis were receiving services in these federally supported programs, which is a very, very large increase over the number of people who received such services in 2014. So there's been a lot of growth in the number of programs over this 10-year period. In addition to first episode psychosis program, SAMHSA began funding community-based treatment programs for clinical high risk for psychosis starting in 2018. And a total of, it's actually 36 states have participated in 2 cohorts of federally funded clinics for clinical high risk. These programs emphasize early identification of psychosis risk, rapid access to evidence-based care, and offered within a person-centered format. And although this is this effort has received less funding than the first episode psychosis programs, it has had a similar impact in demonstrating that it is possible to develop clinical high-risk programs in community settings in the U.S., to sustain those programs over time. And now we're in a situation where we have hundreds of youth with clinical high risk of psychosis are receiving stepped care services every year. So the takeaways from this first part of the talk are recognizing that there are now nearly 400 federally funded treatment programs today that address the needs of young people at risk for serious mental illness. State mental health agencies are using federal funds to implement science-based prevention and early intervention approaches. And this has been possible through new partnerships between policymakers, clinical providers, service users, and scientists. And those relationships, those partnerships are deepening our understanding of effective early intervention services. And like Kesh mentioned before, this is a process by which science has been informing the treatment, but then the experience of people who are receiving treatment, delivering treatment, are speaking back to the scientists to identify new areas where we need improvement and new opportunities for new intervention. So this has been a very good period, and it's worth taking a moment just to take another look at what accounts for that progress over time. So this is where there was a very sustained effort to translate early psychosis research into action. And how did that happen? Well, NIMH, for the 25 years that I was there, actually had a framework for focusing on research that would inform mental health policy in the United States and have the goal of influencing clinical practice in community settings. Now, within the specific area of early psychosis research, there's been a lot of activity from NIMH to produce the research that would move this enterprise forward. So there's been 10 funding announcements since 1999 for clinical, comparative effectiveness, and implementation research in early psychosis. And starting in 2008, this is actually when I moved from the Translational Research Division at NIMH to the Division of Services and Intervention Research, that the emphasis shifted to research that aims to improve mental health services in real-world settings. And since 2013, there have been three large initiatives to promote early identification, personalized intervention, and continuously improving care in clinics that offer evidence-based treatment to people in the early stages of psychosis. So this has been an NIMH plan in early psychosis going back 25 years. This is my shock and awe slide. This is to show you all of the research activity that, and well, actually, it's not all, but it's a very good accounting of research activity starting in 1999 in research that was directed at clinical high risk for psychosis and first episode psychosis. As I mentioned, there were 10 funding initiatives over a 25-year period, which translate into roughly one initiative every 2.5 years over this period, which is a very good cadence. And it stands up well for other areas of research conducted within NIMH. So there has been a lot of sustained research activity. And that activity really has yielded results that have benefited clinical practice. There have been innovations in clinical assessment and in the areas of psychosis screening and assessment, ways of measuring adolescent and young adult functioning, and then new strategies for taking these assessment tools and being able to use them to meet the needs of people in community treatment settings. And here in the RAISE early treatment program, there was well, actually, let me take one step back. So in the area of psychosis screening and assessment tools, I want to acknowledge that the EpiNet Core assessment battery for first episode psychosis is a battery of measures that describe early psychosis features, symptoms, functioning, and outcomes, as well as the services that are provided and the capabilities of programs that are providing them. And that core assessment battery is now being used in over 100 clinical sites across the United States. That's generating a very large data set about the effectiveness of coordinated specialty care programs for first episode psychosis. I want to acknowledge that EpiNet Core Assessment Battery benefited from work done in Massachusetts. There was an early study that I believe Emily Klein was who we heard from yesterday, was the lead author that took data from the Massachusetts initiative and pulled a forerunner of the EpiNet Core Assessment Battery together using Massachusetts data and illustrated some of the advantages and some of the challenges in doing a core assessment battery that would inform later work with EpiNet. And we have been very, very lucky in EpiNet to have Dost Unger's Leap Center involved as one of the principal scientific hubs in that endeavor. So Dost was able to take the Massachusetts experience into the discussions of how this could realistic assessment batteries could be developed for nationwide implementation. And we're very grateful that Massachusetts has contributed in that way. Similarly, in this area of remote centralized mental health assessment, it's been known for quite a long time that it's a challenge in clinical programs to perform the kind of assessments that are necessary to determine whether people are at clinical high risk for psychosis, experiencing a first episode psychosis, and then how that information would be translated into treatment recommendations and referrals. Part of the problem is these are relatively low incidence cases. So in any clinical program, there's not a sufficient flow of patients to keep clinicians sharp in their ability to make these kinds of determinations. So in the RAISE early treatment program, they explored a way of centralizing the assessment offering the assessment using tele-mental health infrastructure, and found that it was very feasible to do this in a study that involved 34 clinical sites across 22 different states. That approach has been adopted wholly in Washington State to support their first episode service programs. And a second example, again in Massachusetts, Emily Gagan's work with the Empath program, which I know focuses on screening and referral, but still illustrates that there is a feasible way of offering these services to a treatment network that's distributed across a state and with assessors who are able to keep a high degree of reliability. There have been innovations in clinical practice that have come from research. The feasibility and effectiveness of multi-element care, which we call coordinated specialty care in the United States, was illustrated in the RAISE and the STEP programs. The implementation of coordinated specialty care was facilitated by research from the RAISE Connection implementation study, and then later through the Mental Health Block Grant 10% Set Aside study, which was co-funded by NIMH and SAMHSA. In the two other areas, again, this is a place where Massachusetts has played an outsized role in helping us to understand how public education might be used to improve early identification. Vinod Srihari developed a clinical trial to test this approach for reducing duration of untreated psychosis. Larry Seidman from the PrEP program partnered with Vinod as a site in this very influential trial in the United States, which illustrated that this approach is feasible. And that approach that was tested in the research has been developed on a statewide basis in Connecticut to reduce duration of untreated psychosis and to speed early access to treatment. And that approach was then tested in a replication study in Louisiana through the CALM Early Detection Campaign for First Episode Psychosis. But that whole movement would not have been possible if it wasn't for the collaboration between Larry Seidman and Vinod Srihari and the collaboration between Connecticut and Massachusetts. And then finally, the most recent innovation in the United States is the emphasis on a learning healthcare perspective in our public sector service systems. We have the Early Psychosis Intervention Network and the Alacrity Research Centers Program initiatives. And here again, this is NIMH got double duty out of Dos Unger's LEAP program, which was funded through an Alacrity Research Centers program grant. But Dos very graciously took the opportunity to join EpiNet and share the very good work that's going on in Massachusetts to move learning healthcare from a concept into a standard of care in early psychosis. I also want to acknowledge that over the last 10 years, there's been a growth in research that has focused on the voices of lived experience. In the United States, over the last decade, there's been 17 qualitative research studies that describe the personal experiences of young people who are enrolled in coordinated specialty care programs. These studies highlight strengths and limitations of the CSC model for first episode psychosis, and they create opportunities for quality improvement and further research. We've seen in these studies prominent themes that are important to people with lived experience are vocational identity, factors that relate to service engagement, the experience of stigma, and the various pathways to coordinated specialty care. 8 of these papers describe how peer involvement has benefited coordinated specialty care programs. Peers contribute as conveyors of hope and recovery, as leaders on young adult advisory councils, and as peer support specialists on coordinated specialty care teams. This has been a very important and welcome development in the U.S. early psychosis movement to see people with lived experience, their voices being heard and their opportunities to lead and shape these programs being recognized. So the main science to practice takeaways. Over the past 25 years, we've seen steady progress in translating research findings concerning clinical high risk and first episode psychosis into feasible and effective real world programs. Currently, learning health methods are being used to monitor the fidelity, the quality, and the impact of coordinated specialty care services. They're integrating those data and participants' experience with external evidence, and then putting new knowledge that comes out of this interaction into real world practice. Lived experience research has identified multiple avenues for improving coordinated specialty care services, focusing on ways to improve access, engagement, and outcomes, and including peer leadership roles in program development, evaluation, service delivery, and research. So all of that is good stuff that's happened and is happening. And this leads us to what are the next opportunities for progress? And here I'd like to talk for a few minutes just about the rationale for integrating clinical high risk and first episode psychosis service models in the United States. And this may be a place where we could realistically move forward over the course of the next 10 years. So why would we consider doing this? Well, there's recognition that clinical high risk and first episode psychosis, people who experience those conditions, represent overlapping age groups. There's some commonality in the symptoms and the functional problems that they experience, and similar rates of comorbidities, substance abuse, and health concerns. So the population shares some common clinical features. There's also treatments for clinical high risk and first episode psychosis are both grounded in a developmentally focused, recovery oriented, and preventive framework. The treatments that have been offered are multidisciplinary, and multimodal treatment for both clinical high risk and FEP is considered the standard of care. And that multimodal treatment in both cases is personalized, and it changes over time according to the clinical status of the individual through a process of shared decision making. And then a final commonality is that both programs rely on measurement-based treatment to evaluate services and to improve outcomes through quality improvement efforts. So there's some common features there already, and perhaps we could build upon them in service of greater integration. There's also a business case for integrated programs, and I mentioned to you earlier that before NIMH, I wore the hat of a clinical administrator who ran these programs. And here, when I look at the services for clinical high risk and FEP, I can see that there are common resources in each program that could be leveraged for mutual benefit. There are opportunities for cross-training of staff who work in these programs, and that could have the impact of nurturing a resilient and flexible resource. And then finally, optimizing cross-cutting services may improve aspect of care for both populations. So as the degree of integration goes up, the operational efficiency of the combined programs also goes up. And I'd like to talk a little bit about each of these 3 points: common resources, cross-training, and optimizing cross-cutting services, to further my argument that integration may be a way for us to go. So in terms of leveraging common resources, on the top of this slide just recognizes that there are some sunk costs for each program in terms of energy and resources that are devoted to outreach and developing outreach and referral sources. Then in providing a systematic approach to screening, assessment, and progress monitoring, and then collecting and processing clinical data. So each program has this. There's a marginal cost to increasing each of these activities to expand uh, to to um, to accommodate a larger patient census. So these three common activities could be leveraged. The last two, billing and performance reporting and hiring, training, and supervision, uh, are something that requires some special attention. Billing and performance reporting for clinical high risk and first episode psychosis are highly specialized activities. It requires people to delve deeply into the details about billing codes, billing practices, reporting requirements, and so forth. And since there's such a high degree of intensity that's required to train people, to have them develop that capacity so that they're able to collect the resources that support these programs, there's growing understanding that maybe broadening to cover both clinical high risk and FEP, and having a cadre of administrators who are capable to do efficient billing for them would be something that would sustain these programs over time and increase their viability. Now, in terms of hiring, training, and supervision, the importance of this is rooted in the fact that we know that there's a high degree of turnover in personnel in both clinical high risk and first episode psychosis programs. And every time you hire a new person, it takes time and effort to bring them up to speed and competency through training. And then it requires an investment of time and resources in maintaining that expertise and supervision. And if a person leaves, this process has to start all over again. It happens so frequently that having a group of individuals who are dedicated to this enterprise of identifying people who are good candidates for working in these programs, providing them the training, ongoing supervision, and doing this in a way that encourages them to stay with the program is really could be improved if the programs were better integrated. And why do I say that? Because if we had a program that was looking at the needs of workers across this full spectrum of early psychosis services, they could receive cross training in both clinical high risk and first episode psychosis. This would benefit providers by promoting a deeper understanding of developmentally tailored, recovery oriented services that would meet the needs of this combined population. Having a larger cadre of providers that can serve both populations is an asset in filling temporary vacancies that occur when people leave the program. So now, instead of having a program for first episode psychosis, let's say, that has 5 clinicians that are devoted to the service, if one of them leaves, the caseload of the person who left has to be distributed among the remaining 4 individuals. And those vacancies sometimes can last from 6 months to a year before they're filled, which leads to a lot of burden on the remaining providers. If there was a larger cadre, flexible redeployment of clinicians across the 2 services may ease some of that burden that occurs when people leave the program. So that flexible deployment across teams is a mechanism for preserving staff vitality and could be a factor in lessening the burnout that we sometimes see in these programs. And then finally, for the individuals who are clinicians in our programs, broad competencies across both early interventions model, there's anecdotal evidence that increases job satisfaction, and it's an asset for increasing the individual's career mobility because they have a greater depth of experience, a broader set of skills, and they can shop that around for future employment. terms of optimizing cross-cutting services, here improving services improves the experience of people who are receiving care and those who are providing care. In terms of it, coordinating outreach and referral activities, at the stage of intake into the program, active outreach and centralized assessment teams may reduce the duration of untreated illness or the duration of untreated psychosis. We know that the earlier people get into treatment, generally speaking, the less trauma that they experience and the better we can expect their outcomes to be. In terms of deciding who gets enrolled in the programs, it's very, very common in programs uh, to have people who fall in this gray zone, where it's not completely certain whether they meet the criteria for clinical high risk or first episode psychosis. And if you have a program that just focuses on one population versus the other, those people with the gray zone may not receive care because they don't meet the stringent enrollment inclusion criteria of your program. But if you have a spectrum of care, you're able to admit the gray zone cases. And this means that every help seeking person along this continuum will receive care, which is a good thing to have happen. In terms of the viability of these programs, each program relies on having a core census that then builds the base for its financial viability. We know that there are peaks and valleys in these programs in terms of the census. If you have integrated programs, you may be able to smooth the peaks and valleys across those programs by, if the census for the clinical high risk program is running low, but there's an influx of people in first episode psychosis. Again, if you can deploy the clinicians flexibly, you may be able to serve the needs of all of those people without imbalancing the caseloads of clinicians, which leads to a whole host of problems that can compromise their care. And then finally, we were talking about maintaining care over time, over the long period. Having this kind of full spectrum perspectives may, at least for people in the clinical high risk to first episode psychosis pathway, for people who do transition from risk into active illness, having the integrated programs can provide some continuity of care. This would make it possible to have warm handoffs between clinicians in one program and another. And that could be a way of maintaining the individual who's receiving care, maintaining their trust in the process, their engagement in treatment, and ultimately their hope for recovery. There are several options for achieving full spectrum care. And actually, this is the area where I am weakest and you are the strongest. I don't work in these programs, so I can't offer you first person advice about this. But I will note, in terms of one model that nationwide we're seeing is programs integrating or co-locating themselves with bridges between the programs. There are several Massachusetts programs that are pioneering early psychosis continuum of care models. There's the Learning and Readiness for Resilient Youth program in Somerville, McLean's STAR and On Track programs, and Mass General's First Episode Psychosis program and Reset clinics. All of these illustrate approaches, the Larry program being an integrated care program, and then McLean and Mass General co-located programs. Just for a second, I want to give a shout out to the people who work in the Larry program. If I had come up to Massachusetts to give this talk in person, I would seek you guys out and give you all a hug. I am so appreciative that you have found a way of continuing the really great work of Larry Seidman, who was a real pioneer in Massachusetts, early psychosis research and treatment, and beyond Massachusetts, a contributor to our national efforts and also the international literature and activities. Larry was he was a real angel, and I'd give you all a hug for recognizing him in this way. He would have loved that, the Larry program. Then beyond that, there are options for standalone clinical high-risk programs to, if possible, looking at opportunities to pursue full integration or co-location with a coordinated specialty care program, or otherwise partnering with CSC or other programs that serve people with psychosis to assure seamless transitions of youth who develop FEP. So a bridge to the programs, and a strong bridge to the programs that would take people that need longer term care. And then in standalone FEP programs, the approach is to broaden and adjust existing CSC services to account for differences in age and developmental stages of youth at clinical high risk, and then to expand outreach to upstream entities like schools, pediatric, and youth community spaces. We heard yesterday from Emily Klein about her experience in an integrated pediatric program. So that makes me think that might not be the most fertile place for first episode psychosis programs to be coordinating with. But Emily did say that increasing the knowledge and awareness of primary care physicians about first episode psychosis was a useful and important endeavor. So I think the point still remains pertinent. So I'm going to shift now to future directions, and here I want to take a pause just before I launch into the next slides to say, well, I need to recognize with all of you that the world since 2024 has changed within the United States. And I'm not going to go through the entire list, but it's safe to say that the collaboration between the National Institute and the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Service Administration, it's a real question about how that will go forward. We don't even know whether there's going to be a Substance Abuse and Mental Health Administration, what direction the NIMH will take in this new Department of Health and Human Services is a real question. And then what kind of resources are going to be available to the states if that federal support breaks down is a real question. So the world has changed, and this, for me personally, you can imagine I spent 25 years building up to a certain relationship between the federal government and state governments, a relationship between science and practice. This has been, quite a shock to see how things have changed in a short period of time. And my own accommodation to this is I for the most of my life I've been a pretty optimistic person. I've expected that with hard work and perseverance that good things will happen over time. And I haven't abandoned optimism, but I've sort of shifted from optimism to valuing resilience and thinking that it is important to just keep focused on what the future could bring and work towards that. And here I'll say is that if the world has changed, our mission has not changed. So in the United States now, we have about 400 of these coordinated specialty care programs nationwide, which, as I said before, is a large increase over the last decade, a six-fold increase in these programs. Well, the epidemiologic estimates would tell us that it's probably close to 3,000 programs nationwide would be necessary to meet the needs of people experiencing first episode psychosis in our country. So over the next decade, if there were another six-fold increase in the number of programs, that actually would take us in 10 years close to the 3,000 mark. So I see that as the mission for the next 10 years. The mission is to continue that progress, to have these programs grow so that this resource is available to the greatest number of people. Last thing on personal reflections on this. Margaret noted that I had a period of my career in the U.S. Army Medical Service Corps. And while I was a clinical psychologist offering behavioral health services in the Army, through the various trainings that I had to go through, you learn things about Army strategy and tactics and so forth. And one of the things that they tell you is when you're attacked in battle, the first task is to absorb the blow. The second task is to establish a defensible perimeter, something that you can defend. And then once you're defending the perimeter, the third thing that you do is you probe your adversary for weaknesses. And then finally, knowing where the avenues are that would allow you to move forward, you advance. And that's how the Army teaches its officers to think about momentary setbacks and opportunities for advancing. So where are we now? I'm hoping that maybe we're at the closing phase of absorbing the assaults. I'm not quite certain that that's the case, but I think we're getting to that point. So our second task will be to defend what we've already developed and what is excellent. That is a mission. So expanding may not be as important, it may not be as possible, but defending and keeping what has been developed could be done through advocacy with the Congress, and then also imploring state governments to continue their support of these programs. And then with that, over the next few years, as the situation further develops, there may be opportunities for probing and then moving on the offensive. This at least is the way that I've decided to think about the next 10 years. So I offered you to that. So now, if that's what is our charge, then we can talk about the future starting today and what would make things happen to make that growth in early treatment programs possible. So the first two of them are in that area of defending or maintaining what we currently have, focusing on developing vibrant learning communities for sharing and support, knowledge repositories so the advances that we've already achieved aren't lost, and that the knowledge that was gained can be an asset for going at the future. Then for the future, I think that we would benefit through developing a capacity to think more at scale for the implementation of our early psychosis programs, thinking about entrepreneurship, not so much economically, but intellectually across both public and private sectors. And then finally, sustaining advocacy for youth mental health in the United States. So this slide gives you some ideas about where we could look to address each of these recommendations. So learning communities, this meeting that you're having today is an excellent example of keeping that learning, sharing, communication, and support alive. On the national front, there's the Prodromal and Early Psychosis Prevention Network, PEPNEP, which continues to exist. It's run out of Stanford University. They have a number of work groups that are looking at issues related to early psychosis. Um, they maintain a membership of over 1,000 individuals across the country who are sharing experiences, expertise. So that's one worth looking at. There's also a group that is collecting um, uh, experience in the clinical high risk for psychosis programs that were funded by SAMHSA to also collect and then distribute experience of those 26 programs so that they can be available to a broader community. So learning communities, knowledge repositories, and actually that was the clinical high risk learning community shared resource library is the mechanism by which those clinical high risk programs are collecting what they've learned and making it available. And after this talk, I'll send the contact information for that group, so anybody who's interested in that can can contact those leaders of that enterprise. The Early Psychosis Intervention Network is starting its second phase in 2025. There's not a steering group, there's a consortium that's being formed within that network. And that will be a forum for sharing data and resources generated within EpiNet to programs outside of EpiNet. So in terms of thinking at scale, I think here we could be thinking about ways that we could maybe centralize certain functions of early psychosis treatment so that they would become available in a high quality and sustainable fashion across the United States to meet the needs of a very large and diverse population. I mentioned the centralized teleevaluation services, and Massachusetts being a leader in this. There are at least 3 other states that are moving in the direction of Washington State and some in the direction of Massachusetts to develop these services within their states. It may be possible as time goes on that there could be some regional collaborations on efforts like that. And in the same way, perhaps having training and consultation hubs across the country that would serve the purpose of developing this resilient workforce that is capable of offering services across the full spectrum of care. EpiNet has been developing some web-based data platforms that it's making available to clinics outside of EpiNet. So here we're seeing, in fact, the state of Virginia has enrolled all of their coordinated specialty care programs in a data collection project that's based on this EpiNet web-based data service that allows them to import their data and get back actionable information about the quality of their services, the effectiveness of their services, and targets for improvement. And then finally, on this note of entrepreneurship, like I said, this is not entrepreneurship to be thinking about how to make more profit, but a mindset where I'm fascinated by entrepreneurs and the way that they have the capacity to look at gaps and problems as opportunities to be solved. How they embrace innovation as a way of bringing either new technology or new methods to address those gaps and problems, are able to take risks, to try new things, to see how they work, and in the case of failure, to regroup and repeat. These are all qualities of resilience that I think are worth emulating in this new environment that we're moving into in the next decade. And my final thought is then the new partnerships that we could use. So on this slide, you're all familiar with NAMI, the National Council for Mental Well-Being, and Mental Health America. Those three organizations were critically important in creating the appetite within Congress to invest in early psychosis care in 2014, 15, 16, and on. Since then, there's been a new group of players, partners, people with lived experience, students with psychosis, active minds that are organizations that involve young people who have experienced psychosis and are now sharing their experience and their perspectives with the community. One Mind being a private organization that supports research in underserved areas of early psychosis, new technologies, new innovations, and so forth. That's a group of individuals, or they represent a group of individuals who are an incredible resource to bring into the discussions going forward. And I know that in Massachusetts, you have placed a value in including people with lived experience in all stages of your strategic plan formulation, evaluation, and revision. So your doing that is going to be a way of keeping this vital group of partners as part of the mix going forward. So that ends my talk. I would just, my second acknowledgement would be to the health science administrators that I worked with at NIMH over 25 years in the early psychosis area, to individuals from SAMHSA's Center for Mental Health Services, who were really crucial people in helping to implement the science-based services going forward. And then finally, the NIMH supported scientists who've worked on clinical high risk, first episode psychosis, the Alacrity Centers and the AMP Schizophrenia Research Project. The people on those teams are really to be applauded. And I will stop now and say thank you.
Thank you, Bob. That was incredible. And I know there's some questions that people have raised. And so I think we should take two questions. Let me see. I'm just going to look super quick because I saw a couple. We would love to have time to have you address all of the questions, but I'm just going to pick and choose one or two.
Well, I will say now that I'm no longer employed, I have more time in my hands. So if anybody wants to email me, I'm available.
Well, and you're also free perhaps to offer your opinion.
Yes, yes.
Let me see. Shoot.
I liked one question.
Okay, go ahead.
Ken Bobstein.
Thanks,
How does one absorb the blow?
yeah, that was the one I was looking for from Ken.
Yeah.
How does one absorb the blow? Well, I think in this case, I think you remember that every day there are people who need your best services. They need your best help. And for you to provide your best help is to put aside the focusing on the chaos and focusing on the expertise and the value that you bring to that person and that you can help them that day. You can help one person that day. And that will remind you that you have a purpose, you have value, and that nothing that is being said or done around you changes that. And that's a way of continuing to do what you are doing as a way of absorbing the blow. And then, for defending it, there are some states that have really, really stepped forward in putting their own treasure into moving early psychosis forward. Massachusetts is one. New York is another. Virginia is a third. California is another. Ohio is another. It's always been said that the states are the laboratory for democracy in the United States. The states give us an idea about what are the best way that the ideas of the people have to govern and serve themselves in a way that makes most sense to them. I think that supporting states, reminding them that they are sovereign within the United States, that they are not, that the federal government cannot command states beyond its enumerated responsibilities in the Constitution, and bucking up our state legislators and our state executives for whatever they're able to do to reallocate resources to support youth mental health is important and is critical for them to support. That's something that we can all do. We can do it by writing them, calling them, providing data to them. We are still free people who have with agency.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Bob. That was incredibly inspiring for us and just for me. Like we're the fight goes on. We will continue to persevere and persist. So thank you for joining us today.